Hey guys, we're gonna do a little fire building lesson here. I'm in the bush. It's been raining for the last few days. Everything's soaking wet. We'll see what we can do. I'm about 1 kilometer from Rat Lake in Mill Bay, if any of you know where that is. We're gonna go around, gather up some branches. I found some good stumps that we're gonna find some fatwood from. I've shown you guys that before, but we'll go over it again. It's the best fire starter we can find out here, especially when it's been wet, because the stuff stays dry naturally. Follow me. Okay, so what we found here is an old Douglas Fir stump, and one of the properties of Douglas Fir is the resin in it when they die tends to migrate down to the center of the stump. And so when you find an old rotten stump like this, if you kind of poke around, you can see this is all soft and decayed, but if you get into this stuff here, you can find a really solid piece. And that's the spire of sappy wood from the bottom of the tree. When it dies, everything collects down to the middle, and that forms a really well-preserved piece of wood with a lot of resin in it. So we're going to cut that off, and that's going to be our fire starter. The resin protects it from getting wet, and so even when it's been raining for the last few days like it has, that's going to be dry and a really good fire starter for us. So what I've got with me is a pocket saw. Highly recommend for any survival kit. They're lightweight, easy to pack, and we'll see if it's going to work for us. If not, we'll have to use the axe. So basically a pocket saw is just a abrasive piece of wire with 2 rings on it. So we can loop it around and it should cut through this fairly easily. Fatwood, we've got our fire pit set up. I'm going to go around and gather a few branches just off the trees around us. Anything that's up above the ground is the best. It'll be the driest, even though nothing's really dry around here. We'll get some small stuff, we'll get some medium stuff, and some bigger stuff. And we'll use a fatwood to dry it out, as well as get the fire going. So we're just gonna go around, gather some stuff like this. As I said, it's not really dry. Doesn't really need to be. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is process down some of this fatwood. What you're looking for when you gather fatwood, as you can see, it's got this kind of almost wet look to it, and it's got a real turpentine smell to it, and that's the pitch infused into the wood. It's very hard, it's hard to break, so we're gonna have to use a knife to process it down. And this is just my everyday carry pocket knife. It's nothing special, it's not super strong, but what we're gonna do is a process called batoning. So, there goes all my tinder, that's okay. We're gonna set the knife up on something firm. This one will probably just come right off, yep. But to get into some of this thicker, drier stuff here, we're gonna find a good spot to start. Get the knife set into it. We're gonna use another stick and just beat it down there. And you can see it's got that real wet, it almost kind of looks like bacon. Is a good analogy for it. But we're gonna keep batoning some of this down to get some good strips of it. We could have done this on the stump as well. I just use the axe to speed it up a little bit so you guys aren't here watching me all day. Once we got some of this into strips, we're gonna shave it down even finer. We're gonna use a ferro-rod to start this. I typically carry a lighter because it works best and they're fairly reliable, but just to show that it can be done on the West Coast when it's been raining out, we're gonna do it with just a ferro-rod. Ferro-rod's a good backup to a lighter because even if they get wet, they're still going to function just fine. So I'm going to take this fairly thin strip that I've got here, and I'm going to make some shavings of it. And these are actually going to be some of the bigger pieces that I'm going to shave off, because I'm going to make some really fine powder in a second, and that's going to be what we're going to catch the spark from the ferro-rod with. So what I've done here is made a feather stick, and this is going to be what I use after all these shavings on the bottom have caught, and that'll be sort of the starter to the bigger tinder. The fatwood's going to burn really hot, it's going to produce a lot of black smoke, and from there we'll add on some of the wetter, drier twigs that we gathered off the trees. And that'll be the basis of our fire, and we'll start drying some bigger stuff after that. So what I'm gonna do now is create some finer shavings to catch the spark from the ferro-rod. So what I'm gonna do for that, use the back side of my knife, which has actually got a fairly sharp but 90-degree edge as opposed to the blade of the knife. And I'm just gonna move it back and forth on the fat wood like this, and you can see it's making some really fine shavings, almost like powder. And that's gonna work the best for catching the spark from the ferro rod. So once I've got a good bundle of them here, I'll just gently shave them off into the base of my pile here. Get the rest of them there. Okay, and that's gonna be what's gonna catch our spark.
What?
So we're gonna give it a shot here. Again, I'm gonna use the back side of the knife to strike the ferro rod. A lot of them come with a striker, this one did not. And we'll see what we can do here. So the best way to use a ferro rod is get right down and close with it and just work it back and forth like this. And we've got flame. So now we can slowly add to it just like this. Should continue to burn, hopefully. Yep. Once that's starting to go a little bit, we'll try to light our feather stick here. Feather stick's burning. And then I'm gonna add some more pieces of this fat wood to get a really good hot fire going. You can see it's producing a lot of smoke. It's a property of the sap that's in the wood. And once that's burnt a little bit more, we can add our wetter twigs and tinder to it, and we'll have a good hot base to our fire, and we can dry out some bigger stuff with that. Fire on the wet west coast after a big rainfall. It's that easy. Some of this stuff on there, it'll start to dry out. That fat wood will continue to fuel it and keep it hot. And then we can add bigger stuff as we go.